My stepson organized a 26-person family dinner at my country home without asking. He never foresaw. There were 26 of them in my dining room, and not a single one had been invited by me. That I stood in the kitchen doorway, a dish towel still clutched in my hand, and I counted them again. 26. My dining table sat 6, normally. John had dragged in every folding chair from the basement, every extra stool from the garage, and his wife Claire had draped them all with white linen. She must have brought in a suitcase. The plates were mismatched but expensive. The wine was flowing from bottles I had never seen. The laughter was loud and careless, the kind of laughter that belonged to people who had never had to worry about anything more pressing than which vacation house to visit next summer. And at the head of the table, the center of all of it, was my stepson John. He was 38 years old, with his father's eyes and his mother's cruelty, and he was smiling like a man who had just won a very long war. That I had been in the garden when they arrived. That was my ritual now. Every morning, before the sun got too high, I went out to the lavender and the rosemary and the climbing wild roses that my husband and I had planted together. I pulled weeds. I trimmed the dead branches. I talked to the plants like they could hear me, because sometimes that was the only conversation I had all day. It had been 2 years since my husband died. 2 years since I had heard a kind voice in this house. 2 years since someone had touched my hand and told me everything was going to be okay. The garden was the only thing that made sense anymore. And then John had appeared at the gate, flanked by Claire and a dozen of their friends, and he had waved at me like I was a neighbor he hadn't seen in a while. "We're having a little family dinner tonight, Margaret," he had said. "Hope you don't mind. I invited everyone. They're so excited to see the old place." He had said it like he was doing me a favor. That I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to tell him that I was tired, that I had been weeding for 3 hours, that I hadn't even showered. I wanted to tell him that my daughter Sarah was supposed to visit this weekend, and I had been looking forward to it more than I had looked forward to anything in a very long time. I wanted to tell him that this was my house, my home, the place where his father had taken his final breath while I held his hand, and that I was not about to let him turn it into a party venue for his corporate friends. But I didn't say any of that. I just stood there and I said, "How many people?" 26, he said and smiled. "I hope that's all right. I told them you were a wonderful cook. They're all so hungry, Margaret." So I had gone inside. I had changed my clothes. I had looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and seen the face of a 74-year-old woman who was too tired to fight back. I had made vegetarian lasagna, the recipe my husband had loved, because I had nothing else in the house. I had made 2 salads. I had opened cans of olives, jars of pickled vegetables, and a bag of dinner rolls I found in the freezer. I had set out the good dishes, the ones I had brought into this marriage, the ones John's mother had always sneered at because they weren't fine china. And then I had stood in the kitchen doorway and watched 26 strangers sit around my dining table, like they owned the place. That my husband had been a quiet man, a gentle man. He had spent his entire life being underestimated by people like his son. He had been an architect, not a rich one but a good one. He had designed buildings that still stood in this town, buildings that families lived in and worked in and loved. And when he died, he had left me everything. The house, the land, the garden, the clock on the mantel that had belonged to his grandmother. He had left me a small inheritance, barely enough to pay the taxes for a few years, and he had asked me to take care of the garden. "Promise me, Margaret," he had said, his voice barely a whisper. "Promise me you'll take care of the garden." I had promised. I hadn't known then that the promise would be the only thing keeping me alive. John caught my eye from across the room. He stood up, gestured for me to come closer. "Everyone, this is Margaret," he said. "My father's widow. The woman who's been living in this house all by herself for 2 years now. Isn't that sad? Isn't that lonely?" The strangers looked at me with pity. A woman in a velvet jacket said something about how brave I was. A man with a gold watch asked me if I was thinking of moving into a senior community. They had been talking about me before I entered the room. I could feel it in the way they looked at me, like I was a piece of furniture they had been politely ignoring. "Margaret is famous for her garden," Claire said, her voice sickly sweet. "All those herbs and flowers. It's really quite lovely, if you're into that sort of thing. So quaint." The table laughed. The laughter was cruel. but I didn't know if they meant it to be. They were the kind of people who laughed at everything, because laughing was easier than feeling that supper will be ready soon. I said, and I retreated back into the kitchen. I pressed my palms against the counter. The tile was cold. My grandmother's tile from the 1950s, when she had refused to let my grandfather tear it out, because she had installed it herself. She had been a strong woman, my grandmother. She had raised 6 children during the Depression. She had lost 2 of them to illness and never stopped working. She had kept a beautiful home, even when beauty was the last thing on her mind. I had her hands. Everyone said so. My hands were strong and veined and capable of great gentleness. They had held my dying husband. They had held my newborn daughter. They had pulled 1,000 weeds and planted 1,000 seeds and cooked 1,000 meals. And now they were shaking against the counter while my stepson held a banquet in my house without asking that I heard my name. They were talking about me again, out in the dining room. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. The tone of people who had forgotten I was just a few feet away. The tone of people who thought I was too old to matter. I walked to the kitchen window. I looked out at the garden. It was beautiful in the fading light. The lavender was in full bloom. The rosemary had grown so tall it brushed against the windowsill. The wild roses were just starting to open, their petals like velvet in the golden hour. He had loved this garden. My husband had loved it more than he had loved almost anything. And he had given it to me. He had trusted me to protect it, to nurture it, to keep it alive. And now his son was in my dining room, drinking my wine, eating my food, laughing at me with strangers. He was trying to push me out. I knew it. He had been trying to push me out for years. He wanted this house. He wanted the land. He wanted to sell it to developers and make a fortune, and the only thing standing in his way was a 74-year-old widow who didn't have the strength to fight back. Or so he thought. I looked at my reflection in the window. I saw the tired eyes, the gray hair, the lines on my face that told the story of a life lived fully and painfully. I saw the woman who had served in the army, who had driven supply convoys through hostile territory, who had learned to be invisible because visibility was dangerous. I saw the woman who had raised a daughter alone, who had gone back to school at 40, who had married a man everyone said was too old for her, and loved him until the last breath left his body. That woman was still inside me. She was just hiding. I heard footsteps behind me. Sarah. My daughter. She had let herself in through the back door, the way she always did. I had taught her that. Always come through the back door. Always be aware of your surroundings. Always know where the exits are. Mom, she said softly. What is happening out there? John decided to have a dinner party, I said. 26 people. He didn't tell me. Her face changed. It was the same expression she had worn when she was 8 years old, and a bully had pushed her on the playground. It was the same expression she had worn when she was 18, and her father had told her he was leaving us. It was the expression of someone who was about to fight. 26, she said. There are only 12 chairs in that room. They brought extra. Mom. She stepped closer. What are you going to do? I looked down at my hands. At the old bracelet on my wrist, the one with the dice charm. My father had given it to me the day I enlisted. He was a sergeant, 40 years in the army. He had told me that I was made of strong stuff. He had told me that women in our family were born with iron in their bones. I'm going to serve dinner, I said quietly. And then I'm going to figure out what happens next. I carried the lasagna into the dining room. John was telling a story, something about a business deal. He was loud and confident, and everyone was watching him. No one saw me. No one thanked me. I set the dish on the table and stepped back into the shadows. I watched John's wife Claire lean over and whisper something to the woman in the velvet jacket. I watched the woman laugh. I watched John raise his glass, and I realized, with a cold clarity that surprised me, that they had never considered me a threat. They had never considered me anything. And that was the thing about being invisible. People forgot you were watching. People forgot you were counting. People forgot that you had iron bones. I walked back into the kitchen. Sarah was waiting for me. She had her phone in her hand. I'm going to call a lawyer, she said. We're going to fight this. He can't just come in here and treat you like this. This is your house. This is your life. He can, I said. He has. But he's not going to do it forever. Sarah looked at me. What are you saying? I sat down at the kitchen table. I felt every one of my 74 years in my bones. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. A plan. Property taxes are due in 6 months, I said. John knows that. He's been waiting. He thinks I can't pay them. He thinks I'll have to sell. He thinks the house will go to a developer, and he'll get his share of the money because he's the next of kin. What are you going to do? I looked out the window at the garden. I looked at the lavender and the rosemary and the wild roses. I thought about my husband's final words. Promise me you'll take care of the garden. I'm going to pay the taxes, I said. And I'm going to keep the house. But first, I'm going to need some help. I thought about Patricia Greer, the lawyer who had helped my husband draft his will. I thought about the county zoning board, the town council, every local official I had ever met. I thought about the army training that had taught me to move a convoy through a war zone without anyone noticing. I thought about the vine, the name they had called me because I was always climbing, always growing, always finding a way. I looked at Sarah. I need you to make a phone call, I said. Who? Patricia Greer. The lawyer. Tell her I need to come in. Tell her I have questions about the estate. Sarah nodded. She had stopped looking angry. Now she was looking fierce, the way she had looked when she was a child and someone had hurt me. The way she had always looked when she was about to protect me. I had spent my whole life protecting her. Now she was protecting me. And that was the most beautiful thing in the world. The 26 people in my dining room ate and drank and laughed. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't know that the old woman in the kitchen was making plans. They didn't know that I was a soldier, a mother, a gardener, a vine. They had no idea what was coming. And that was exactly how I wanted it. The morning after the dinner, I woke up before the sun. That wasn't unusual. I had been waking up before the sun for 74 years. And I suspected I would keep doing it until the day I died. But this morning was different. This morning, I had a purpose. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the light creep over the garden. The lavender looked purple-gray in the dawn. The roses were still closed, waiting for warmth. Everything was quiet, peaceful, and I felt the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. My phone buzzed. Sarah. She had been up all night, she said, reading property law and zoning regulations. She had already called Patricia Greer's office and left a message. She's not in until 9, Sarah said. But I told her assistant it was urgent. She'll call you back. Thank you, baby. Sarah's voice was tight. Are you sure about this fighting John? He's got money. He's got connections. He's got Claire and all those awful people. Are you sure you want to do this? I looked out the window. The first ray of sun hit the garden, and the whole world turned gold. I'm sure, I said. I've been letting things happen to me for too long. It's time I started happening to things. I hung up. I finished my coffee. I put on my gardening clothes, the ones with dirt permanently ground into the knees. I went out to the garden and I worked. I pulled weeds. I trimmed the dead branches. I watered everything that needed watering. It was my meditation, my prayer, the only way I knew how to start a day. At 9 o'clock, Patricia Greer called. Margaret, she said. I heard about the dinner. I am so sorry. Thank you, Patricia. But I need to talk to you about something more than that. I thought you might. She paused. Can you come in this afternoon? I have a cancellation at 2. I'll be there. I hung up and went back to the garden. But I couldn't concentrate. My mind was racing. I thought about John, about the way he had looked at me across the table. He had been so confident, so sure of himself. He had thought he was winning. He had thought I was already beaten. He didn't know me. He had never known me. All those years, while I took care of his father, while I made meals and folded laundry and sat in hospital waiting rooms, he had looked at me and seen a servant. He had seen someone who was there to serve him, to make his life easier, to disappear when she was no longer useful. He had never seen the vine. I was still thinking about that when I drove into town. It was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone. I had lived here for 15 years, ever since I married my husband. I knew the shop owners. I knew the mailman. I knew the pastor at the church I never attended and the librarian who always saved the gardening magazines for me. But I had never really been part of this town. I had always been the outsider, the second wife, the woman who had married the older man for his money. That was what they thought. That was what John had made sure they thought. When I walked into Patricia's office, she was already waiting for me. She was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had been my husband's friend for 30 years, and she had never once treated me like an outsider. "Margaret," she said, hugging me.
"Come in.
"Sit down." I sat in the leather chair across from her desk. The room smelled like old books and coffee. It was a comforting smell. "Tell me everything," Patricia said that I told her. I told her about the dinner, about the 26 strangers, about John's smile and Claire's laughter, and the way they had talked about me like I wasn't there. I told her about the garden, about my husband's last words, about the promise I had made. I told her about the property taxes, due in 6 months, and about John's careful, patient plan to push me out. When I finished, Patricia was silent for a long moment. She leaned back in her chair and studied me with those sharp eyes. "John isn't just trying to push you out, Margaret," she said. "He's trying to take everything. The house, the land, the garden. He's been talking to developers. I've heard rumors." "Developers? Someone wants to buy the property and turn it into a luxury housing development. They've been making offers to John. He doesn't own the property, of course, but he's been telling people that you're going to sell, that you can't afford the taxes, that you're going to move into a senior home." My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my knees to steady them. "He's been telling people that. His wife's been telling people that. There's a difference. Claire is the one who's been spreading the rumors. She's the one who's been telling everyone that you're frail, that you're confused, that you can't take care of yourself. She's been building a case." "A case for what? To have you declared incompetent. To take control of your finances. To make you a ward of the state." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had known John was cruel. I had known he was greedy. But I hadn't known he was willing to destroy me completely. "Can he do that?" I asked. "Can he just declare me incompetent?" "It's not that easy," Patricia said. "But it's not that hard either. If he can convince a judge that you're unable to manage your own affairs, he can be appointed as your guardian. And then he can do whatever he wants with the property." I thought about Claire, about her sweet smile and her vicious words. I thought about the way she had looked at me at the dinner, like I was an insect she was about to squash. "She doesn't know me," I said quietly. "Neither of them does." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean they think I'm weak. They think I'm old. They think I'm going to roll over and let them take everything. But I'm not." I leaned forward. "I spent 20 years in the army. I spent 15 years taking care of my husband. I've been invisible my whole life, but I've never been weak." Patricia smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that said she had been waiting for this conversation for a long time. "I know you're not weak, Margaret," she said. "Your husband knew it too. That's why he left you everything. He knew John would try to take it from you. He knew John would try to destroy you. And he knew you would be strong enough to fight back." "How do I fight back?" "First, we changed the zoning of the property." I blinked. "Change the zoning. If you can get the property rezoned as agricultural, you can run a commercial garden. You can sell your herbs and flowers and vegetables. You can make money. And more importantly, you can show the court that you're not just a frail old woman living alone in a big house. You're a businesswoman. You're a property owner. You're a person who is fully capable of managing her own affairs." "But how do I change the zoning?" "That's where things get tricky." Patricia pulled out a folder and spread it across her desk. "You need to file an application with the county. You need to attend hearings. You need to convince the zoning board that your garden is a legitimate business. You'll need to provide evidence, financial projections, marketing plans. And you'll need to do it all while John and Claire try to stop you." I looked at the folder. It was thick, filled with forms and regulations and legal jargon. It looked overwhelming. But I had been overwhelmed before. I had been overwhelmed when I was 22, holding my newborn daughter and wondering how I was going to raise her alone. I had been overwhelmed when I was 40, starting college while working 2 jobs. I had been overwhelmed when I was 60, watching my husband slowly die in a hospital bed. I had survived all of it. "Give me the forms," I said. "I'll start tonight." Patricia slid the folder across the desk. There's one more thing, Margaret. What's that? John has been making moves. He's not just waiting for you to fail. He's actively working against you. He's been talking to members of the zoning board. He's been spreading rumors about you. He's been trying to turn the community against you. Let him. Patricia's eyebrow went up again. I've been a gardener my whole life, I said. I know how things grow. You can't rush a seed. You can't force a flower. You just have to keep watering, keep weeding, keep waiting. And eventually, what's meant to grow will grow. I left Patricia's office with the folder in my arms. I drove back to the house. I walked through the garden, breathing in the lavender, touching the rosemary. I thought about my husband. I thought about his last words. Promise me you'll take care of the garden. He had known. He had known John would come for me. He had known I would have to fight. And he had given me the garden as a weapon that evening. I sat at the kitchen table with the zoning form spread out in front of me. I had a cup of tea. I had a pen. I had my father's bracelet on my wrist, and the dice charm was cold against my skin that I started filling out the forms. It was tedious work. I had to describe the property, the business, the financial projections. I had to write a statement explaining why the zoning change was necessary. I had to attach evidence of my gardening experience, my knowledge of the market, my ability to run a business. It was going to take weeks, months maybe, but I had time. I had patience. I had the kind of determination that came from years of being underestimated. At 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Sarah. Hey Mom, she said. How are you holding up? I'm holding up fine, I said. I'm filling out zoning forms. I'm going to change the zoning of the property and start a commercial garden. There was a long pause. Then Sarah laughed. It was a bright, surprised laugh, the kind she used to make when she was a little girl, and I had done something unexpected. Mom, she said. You're amazing. I know. Seriously. John has no idea what's coming, does he? No, I said. He doesn't. We talked for a while longer. Sarah told me about her job, about her friends, about the man she had been seeing. I told her about the garden, about the herbs and flowers I was planning to grow, about the sachets and oils I was going to make and sell. And then at midnight I hung up and went back to work. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I worked in the garden every morning. I filled out zoning forms every afternoon. I made phone calls. I wrote emails. I gathered evidence. I built a case piece by piece the way I had built everything else in my life. And then John showed up. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon, when I was in the middle of a particularly difficult patch of weeding. I was on my hands and knees, my gloves covered in dirt, my hair falling into my face. Margaret, he said. We need to talk. I stood up slowly. My knees ached. I brushed the dirt off my gloves. About what? About this. He waved his hand, indicating the garden, the house, the land. This property. Your plans. I heard you're trying to change the zoning. I am. You can't do that. I can. I have. I've filed the application. John's face reddened. Do you have any idea what you're doing? This isn't a game, Margaret. You can't just decide to turn this place into a farm. You don't have the money. You don't have the experience. You don't have anything. I have the garden, I said. And I have my husband's memory. And I have more fight in me than you've ever seen. He laughed. It was the same laugh from the dinner. The one that was meant to make me feel small. You're 74 years old, he said. You're going to turn a garden into a business. You're going to compete with farmers and nurseries and wholesalers. You don't even know how to use a computer. I know how to grow things. That's all that matters. You're going to fail. Maybe. I met his eyes. But I'm going to fail trying. And when I do, you still won't get this house. I'll sell it to a stranger before I let you have it. I'll donate it to the town. I'll burn it to the ground before I let you take it from me. John stared at me. He was shocked. He had never heard me speak like this. He had never heard me fight. You're making a mistake, he said. I've been making mistakes my whole life, I said. But this isn't one of them. He turned and walked away. I watched him go. I felt my heart pounding, my hands shaking, my breath coming fast. I had done it. I had stood up to him. I had fought back. But I also knew he wasn't done. He would try again. He would try harder. He would do whatever it took to destroy me. And I would do whatever it took to survive. The next day I went back to Patricia's office. I brought more forms, more evidence, more financial projections. I brought a list of everything I had already planted and everything I planned to plant. I have a question, I said. About John. If he tries to have me declared incompetent, what can I do to stop him? Patricia leaned back in her chair. You need to prove that you're competent. That means showing the court that you have a business, a plan, a future. It means showing them that you're not just living in the past. It means showing them the garden. And what if he wins? What if he convinces the judge that I can't manage my own affairs? Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Margaret, I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you take care of your husband. I've watched you take care of this house. I've watched you grow a garden out of nothing. If you can't manage your own affairs, then no one can. I left her office feeling stronger than I had felt in years. I drove back to the house and I walked through the garden. The lavender was blooming. The roses were opening. The rosemary was tall and green and fragrant. I knelt down in the dirt. I touched the soil with my bare hands. I had iron bones, my father had said. I had always known it was true, but I had forgotten somewhere along the way. I had let John make me feel small. I had let Claire make me feel invisible. I had let the world make me feel old. But I wasn't small. I wasn't invisible. And I wasn't old in the way they thought I was. I was 74 years old. And I was just getting started. The first hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach and a cold determination in my heart. I had spent the last 3 weeks preparing. I had filled out every form. I had gathered every piece of evidence. I had practiced what I was going to say in front of the mirror until my voice stopped shaking. But when I walked into the county office building, I realized I had forgotten something. I had forgotten that John was a master at playing the game. He was already there when I arrived. He was standing in the hallway with Claire, both of them dressed like they were going to a funeral. Black suits, black shoes, black expressions. They were talking to a man I didn't recognize, a heavy-set man in an expensive suit who carried a leather briefcase and looked like he had never done a day of manual labor in his life. Margaret, John said, his voice dripping with false warmth. I'm so glad you could make it. This is my attorney, Gerald Vance. He'll be representing our interests today. I shook Gerald's hand. His grip was limp like a dead fish. His smile was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Whitfield, he said. I've heard so much about you. I'm sure you have. I walked past them and took my seat in the hearing room. Patricia was already there, waiting for me. She had a stack of papers in front of her and a look of calm professionalism on her face. You look nervous, she said quietly. I'm not nervous. I'm furious. That's good. Use it. The zoning board filed in. There were 5 of them, all middle-aged men and women who looked like they had seen every zoning dispute this town had ever produced. They took their seats at the long table at the front of the room. The chairman, a balding man with kind eyes, called the hearing to order. We are here today to consider an application for rezoning filed by Margaret Whitfield, he said. The application seeks to change the zoning classification of the property located at 42 Willow Lane from residential to agricultural commercial. Mrs. Whitfield, would you like to make a statement? I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was steady. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Margaret Whitfield. I've lived at 42 Willow Lane for 15 years. I inherited the property from my husband, who passed away 2 years ago. The property includes a large garden that I have been tending for over a decade. I have documented my gardening activities, my financial projections, and my business plan. I am seeking this zoning change so that I can transform my garden into a commercial herb and flower business. I believe this business will be a valuable addition to our community, and I am fully prepared to operate it within all applicable regulations. The chairman nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition? John stood up. I felt my stomach drop. Mr. Chairman, he said. My name is John Whitfield. Margaret Whitfield is my stepmother. I oppose this application. My father left this property to Margaret, but he did not intend for it to be used as a commercial enterprise. He intended for it to remain a family home. Furthermore, I have concerns about Margaret's ability to manage such a business. She is 74 years old. She lives alone. She has no business experience. And I have reason to believe that she is not fully competent to manage her own affairs. The room went silent. I felt Patricia's hand on my arm. Mr. Whitfield, Patricia said, standing up. Are you implying that my client is not competent to run her own business? I am simply expressing my concerns, John said smoothly. I love my stepmother. I want what's best for her. And I don't think a commercial garden is what's best. The chairman looked at me. Mrs. Whitfield, do you have a response? I stood up again. I looked at John. I looked at his attorney. I looked at Claire, who was sitting in the back row with a smug expression on her face. Mr. Chairman, I said, I have spent the last 15 years taking care of this property. I have spent the last 10 years tending this garden. I have spent the last 2 years preparing to turn it into a business. I am not incompetent. I am not old in the way they think I am. I am fully capable of managing my own affairs, and I will prove it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I walked to the front of the room and handed it to the chairman. These are my financial projections, I said. These are my marketing plans. These are my tax returns for the last 5 years. And these are letters of support from members of this community who believe in what I am trying to do. The chairman opened the folder. He read through the letters. He looked at the financial projections. He exchanged a glance with one of the other board members. Mrs. Whitfield, he said, we will take all of this information into consideration. We will make a decision within 2 weeks. Thank you for your time. I walked out of the room on legs that felt like jelly. Patricia was beside me, her hand on my elbow. You did great, she said. You were calm. You were prepared. You were professional. He tried to have me declared incompetent, I said. He said it right there in front of everyone. I know. And everyone saw it. Everyone saw him try to tear you down. And everyone saw you stand up and fight back. I went home. I walked through the garden. I touched the lavender. I breathed in the rosemary. I thought about John's face, the way he had smiled when he said those words. He had tried to humiliate me. He had tried to destroy me. And he had failed, but I knew he wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. He was too desperate, too greedy, too cruel to let go. And that meant I couldn't stop either. The next week, I got a call from Patricia. Margaret, she said. The zoning board approved your application. Congratulations. I sat down on the kitchen chair. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. They approved it. Unanimously. They were impressed by your presentation. They were impressed by your evidence. And they were not impressed by John's attempts to undermine you. I cried. I sat in my kitchen, and I cried like a child. I had done it. I had won. I had taken a stand and I had won. But the victory was short-lived. The next day, I went out to the garden and found that my lavender had been trampled. My rosemary had been pulled up by the roots. My wild roses had been cut down, their beautiful blooms lying on the ground like fallen soldiers. That I stood there, staring at the destruction. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I had worked so hard. I had put so much love into this garden. And someone had come in the night and destroyed it. I knew who it was. I didn't have any proof, but I knew. John. He had lost the zoning battle, so he had decided to take his revenge in a different way. He had decided to destroy what I loved most. Called Sarah. I told her what had happened. She was silent for a long moment. Mom, she said. I'm coming home. I'm going to help you fix this. You don't have to do that, baby. You have a job. You have a life. I have a mother who needs me. That's more important. She came that night. She arrived with bags of soil and seeds and plants. She didn't say a word about John. She didn't say a word about the destruction. She just started working. We replanted the lavender. We replanted the rosemary. We replanted the wild roses. We worked until our hands bled and our backs ached. And when we were done, we sat in the middle of the garden, covered in dirt and tears, and we held each other. He's not going to stop, Sarah said. He's going to keep coming. He's going to keep trying to destroy you. I know. What are we going to do? I looked at the garden. It was beautiful again, even though it was fragile. It was beautiful because we had rebuilt it, because we had refused to let John win. I'm going to keep growing, I said. I'm going to keep planting. I'm going to keep fighting. And I'm going to make sure he never, ever takes anything from me again. Sarah looked at me. She had tears in her eyes, but she also had a smile. That's my mom, she said. The next morning I went to the hardware store. I bought motion sensor lights. I bought a security camera. I bought a fence and locks for every gate. I was going to protect my garden. I was going to protect my home. I was going to protect everything I had built. And I was going to do it in broad daylight so everyone could see. When I got home, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from Gerald Vance, John's attorney. It said that John was filing a petition to have me declared incompetent. It said that the hearing would be in 2 weeks. It said that I needed to hire an attorney and prepare my defense. I read the letter 3 times. I folded it carefully. I put it in my pocket. Then I went out to the garden. I looked at the new plants, the new fence, the new lights. I thought about my husband. I thought about my father. I thought about the dice charm on my bracelet. And I thought about what my father had said all those years ago. We roll the dice every day. We don't know what's going to come up, but we play anyway. We keep playing. I walked into the house. I picked up the phone. I called Patricia. Margaret, she said. I was just about to call you. I heard about the petition. John's going to try again. I know. I got the letter. We need to prepare. We need to gather evidence. We need to show the court that you are fully competent. We need to show them that John is lying. I looked around my house. I looked at the clock on the mantel. I looked at the garden through the window. I looked at the bracelet on my wrist. I'm not afraid, I said. I've been through worse. I've lost more. I've survived more. And I'm going to survive this too. I know you are, Patricia said. But you need to be ready. This is going to be a fight. I'm always ready for a fight. I'm a soldier. I'm a mother. I'm a gardener. I'm the vine. And I'm going to win. I hung up the phone. I went out to the garden. I knelt in the dirt. I touched the new plants. I felt their fragile stems, their delicate leaves. I had rebuilt them once. I could rebuild them again. And this time, I would make sure they were strong enough to survive anything. The hearing was set for a Tuesday. I spent the 2 weeks leading up to it in a state of controlled panic. I worked in the garden every morning. I met with Patricia every afternoon. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. My tax returns, my bank statements, my medical records, letters from my neighbors, letters from my friends, letters from everyone who had ever seen me take care of my husband, my home, my garden. But the thing I didn't have was a witness. Someone who had seen John destroy my garden. Someone who could prove he was the one trying to destroy me. Sarah tried to help. She called her friends. She called her coworkers. She put up posters around town asking if anyone had seen anything the night my lavender was trampled. No one came forward. He's too careful, Patricia said. He knows what he's doing. He's not going to leave evidence. Then how do I beat him? You beat him by showing the court who you really are. You beat him by being stronger, smarter, more prepared. You beat him by refusing to break. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I watched the light creep over the garden. It was beautiful. The lavender was growing back. The rosemary was regaining its height. The wild roses were blooming again, fragile but determined, just like me. I touched the bracelet on my wrist. The dice charm was cold against my skin. We roll the dice, I whispered. We play anyway. I drove to the courthouse. Patricia was waiting for me in the hallway. She looked calm and professional, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Are you ready? She asked. I'm ready. We walked into the courtroom. It was a small room, with wooden benches and a high judge's bench at the front. John was already there. He was sitting at the plaintiff's table with Gerald Vance, his attorney. Claire was in the front row, her face carefully composed. John looked at me. He smiled. It was the same smile from the dinner. The one that was meant to make me feel small. I didn't look away. I held his gaze. I sat down at the defense table with Patricia. I folded my hands in front of me. I waited. The judge entered. He was a tall man with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked at me. He looked at John. He sat down and adjusted his robes. All right, he said. Let's get started. Gerald Vance stood up. He cleared his throat. He launched into a speech about how John loved me, how he wanted what was best for me, how he was concerned about my ability to manage my own affairs. He presented evidence. My age. My medical records. The fact that I lived alone. The fact that my husband had died. He made me sound like a fragile old woman who couldn't be trusted to take care of herself. Patricia stood up next. She presented the zoning approval. She presented my financial projections. She presented my tax returns. She presented letters from my neighbors, from the local garden club, from the farmer's market where I had already started selling my herbs. Your Honor, Patricia said, Margaret Whitfield is not incompetent. She is a successful businesswoman. She is a property owner. She is a member of this community. She has proven time and time again that she is fully capable of managing her own affairs. The only person who is incompetent in this courtroom is John Whitfield, who has spent the last 2 years trying to destroy his stepmother for her property. John's face reddened. He stood up, but Gerald Vance put a hand on his arm. Your Honor, Gerald said. We have additional evidence to present. I felt my stomach drop. Additional evidence? What additional evidence? Gerald Vance reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He handed it to the judge. The judge opened it. He read it. His expression didn't change. Mrs. Whitfield, the judge said. Do you recognize this document? He handed it to me. I looked at it. It was a letter. A letter from my husband, dated 3 years before he died. It was addressed to John. I started reading. My hands were shaking. The words were blurry through my tears. My husband had written a letter to John. He had apologized for leaving me the house. He had offered to change his will. He had told John that he was sorry, that he had made a mistake, that he would make things right. I looked up. I stared at John. He was smiling. This letter was written by your husband, Gerald said. It indicates that he was planning to change his will. It indicates that he did not intend for Margaret Whitfield to inherit the property. It indicates that John Whitfield is the rightful heir. That's a lie, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Mrs. Whitfield, the judge said. Is this letter genuine? I looked at the letter again. I knew my husband's handwriting. I knew the way he formed his letters, the way he dotted his I's, the way he crossed his T's. This looked like his handwriting. It looked exactly like his handwriting, but it couldn't be genuine. It couldn't be. My husband had never once apologized for leaving me the property. He had never once suggested he might change his will. He had been proud of his decision. He had been proud of me. I looked at John. He was watching me. He was waiting. He had known this letter would hurt me. He had known it would confuse me. He had counted on it. I felt Patricia's hand on my arm. Your Honor, Patricia said. We request a recess. My client is clearly distressed. The judge nodded. Recess. 1 hour. I walked out of the courtroom on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Sarah was waiting for me in the hallway. She grabbed my hands. Mom, she said. That letter. Is it real? I don't know, I said. It looks real. It looks exactly like his handwriting. But I can't believe he wrote it. I can't believe he would apologize to John. I can't believe he would offer to change his will. Maybe he was pressured, Patricia said. Maybe John pressured him to write it. No, I said. John wasn't around. John barely visited. He didn't care about his father. He didn't care about anything. I paced the hallway. I felt like the walls were closing in. I had been so confident. I had been so prepared. And now I was falling apart. And then I remembered. The dice charm. My father's words. We roll the dice. We keep playing. I stopped pacing. I looked at Sarah. I looked at Patricia. I need to go to the house, I said. Now the hearing is in an hour. I need to go. I need to look at something. I'll be back in time. I drove home. I walked through the house. I went to my bedroom. I opened the closet. I reached into the back, where I had stored the box of my husband's things. I pulled out the box. I opened it. I looked through it. Letters. Photographs. Old receipts. And then I found it. A journal. My husband's journal. He had kept a journal for the last year of his life, writing down his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. I opened it. I started reading. The handwriting was the same as the letter, but the words were different. The words were about me, about how much he loved me, about how grateful he was for everything I had done, about how proud he was of the garden. And then I found the entry that changed everything. It was dated 1 month before he died. He had written about John. He had written about the pressure John was putting on him. He had written about the threats, the demands, the constant harassment. And then he had written, I will not change my will. I will not give John what he wants. I love Margaret. I trust Margaret. And I will protect her, even if it means protecting her from my own son. I closed the journal. I held it to my chest. I felt tears streaming down my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. They were tears of vindication that the letter John had presented was a forgery. He had copied my husband's handwriting. He had added his own words. He had lied. He had lied to the court. He had lied to everyone. And now I was going to prove it. I drove back to the courthouse. I was 10 minutes late. The judge was already in his seat. John was looking smug. Gerald was looking confident. Patricia was looking worried. But I was looking furious. Your Honor, I said. I apologize for my lateness, but I have evidence to present. Evidence that proves the letter is a forgery. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. I handed him the journal. I explained what it was. I explained when it had been written. I explained how it proved my husband had never intended to change his will. The judge read the entry. His expression changed. Mr. Vance, he said. Do you have a response? Gerald Vance was pale. He was stammering. Your Honor, I wasn't aware of this journal. I was acting on the instructions of my client. The judge turned to John. Mr. Whitfield, where did you get that letter? John's face had gone white. He was shaking. I found it. In my father's things. You found it. And you presented it to this court as evidence. Yes, Your Honor. The judge stared at him. Mr. Whitfield, I am going to ask you one more time. Where did you get that letter? John opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at me. He looked at his attorney. He looked at the judge. I forged it, he said. I copied my father's handwriting. I wrote it myself. The room went silent. I felt Patricia's hand on my shoulder. I felt Sarah's arm around my waist. I felt the dice charm on my wrist, cold and steady. Mr. Whitfield, the judge said. You have committed perjury. You have presented forged evidence to this court. You have attempted to defraud your stepmother of her property. Do you have anything to say for yourself? John looked at me. His eyes were pleading. He was crying. Margaret, he said. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted the house. I just wanted the money. I was desperate. I'm so sorry. I looked at him. I felt so many things. Anger. Betrayal. Sadness. But underneath all of it I felt something else. Something I hadn't expected. Pity. Your Honor, I said. I don't want him to go to jail. I don't want to press charges. I just want him to leave me alone. I just want to keep my house. I just want to keep my garden. The judge nodded. Given the circumstances, I am going to dismiss the petition. Margaret Whitfield is fully competent. John Whitfield, you are ordered to pay court costs. You are ordered to stay away from Margaret Whitfield and her property. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. John nodded. He didn't say anything. He just walked out of the courtroom, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. Claire followed him. And I stood there, in the middle of the courtroom, feeling like I had just survived a war. I had won. I had won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. It felt like putting one foot in front of the other, like climbing through barbed wire, like growing through concrete. I walked out of the courthouse. Sarah was beside me. Patricia was behind me. The sun was shining. The sky was blue. And I was alive. Mom, Sarah said. How do you feel? I feel tired, I said. But I feel free. The week after the hearing I didn't leave the house. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't open the door. I just sat in my garden and watched the plants grow. The lavender was coming back strong. The rosemary had already regained its height. The wild roses were blooming again. Their petals soft and pink in the morning light. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. I had won the battle, but I had lost something I didn't know I had. I had lost the illusion that John was just misguided, just greedy, just a product of his father's mistakes. He wasn't any of those things. He was a liar. He was a forger. He was someone who would destroy anyone who stood in his way. Sarah stayed with me for the first few days. She made me tea. She sat with me in the garden. She didn't push me to talk, and I was grateful for that. But on the third day, she sat down across from me and took my hands. "Mom," she said, "you can't stay here forever. You have a business to run. You have a garden to tend. You have a life." "I know." "Then why aren't you doing anything?" I looked at her. She had her mother's eyes, my eyes. She had my stubbornness, my determination. She was so much stronger than I had ever been at her age. "I'm scared," I said. "I'm scared that if I leave this house, something else will happen. I'm scared that if I start the business, John will find a way to ruin it. I'm scared that I'm not strong enough to do this alone." "You're not alone," she said. "You have me. You have Patricia. You have everyone in this town who believes in you. And you have the garden." I looked at the garden. It was beautiful. It was resilient. It had been trampled and torn and destroyed. And it had come back stronger than before. It had taught me something I had forgotten. Something I needed to remember. I stood up. I walked to the center of the garden. I knelt down in the dirt. I put my hands in the soil. "I'm going to start the business," I said. "I'm going to make this garden work. I'm going to sell my herbs and my flowers and my sachets. I'm going to prove to everyone that I can do this, including myself." Sarah smiled. It was the smile she had worn when she was a little girl, and I had told her she could be anything she wanted to be. "That's my mom," she said that afternoon. I made a list. It was a long list. I wrote down everything I needed to do to get the business off the ground. I needed to build a website. I needed to buy packaging. I needed to set up an online store. I needed to market myself. I needed to find suppliers. I needed to figure out pricing. I needed to do everything I had never done before. I looked at the list. It was overwhelming. But I had been overwhelmed before. I had been overwhelmed when I was 22 and single and pregnant. I had been overwhelmed when I was 40 and starting college. I had been overwhelmed when I was 60 and watching my husband die. That I had survived all of it. I would survive this too. The next morning, I drove into town. I went to the farmer's market. I talked to the other vendors. I asked them how they had started. I asked them what they had learned. I asked them for advice. A woman named Ellie ran the booth next to mine. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and hands that were permanently stained from working with berries. She had been selling at the market for 20 years. "You're the woman with the garden," she said. "The one who fought her stepson in court." "That's me. You're a legend around here. Everyone's talking about you. Everyone's rooting for you." She leaned closer. "If you need any help, I'm here. We all are." I blinked back tears. I had expected people to be suspicious of me. I had expected people to side with John. But they didn't. They had seen what he had done. They had seen me fight back. And they had chosen to support me. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I built a website. It was clunky and amateurish, but it worked. I ordered packaging for my sachets and oils. I designed labels. I took pictures of the garden and posted them online. I opened an Etsy shop. I started a social media account. And then one day, something happened. I was checking my messages when I saw a notification. Someone had posted about my garden on a local Facebook group. The post was simple. It said, "This woman grows the most beautiful lavender I have ever seen. She makes sachets and oils that smell like heaven. Support your local gardeners." The post went viral. I didn't know how it happened. I didn't know who had shared it. But within a day, I had received dozens of orders. People were buying my sachets. People were buying my oils. People were asking for custom bouquets and flower arrangements that I couldn't keep up. I was working 14-hour days, harvesting plants, drying flowers, making products, packaging orders. I was exhausted, but I was also exhilarated. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose. I felt like I was building something. Sarah helped when she could. She came up on weekends. She helped me pack orders and answer emails. She even helped me set up a small studio in the garage where I could make my products more efficiently. You're doing it, she said one evening, standing in the middle of the garage, surrounded by boxes and jars and labels. You're actually doing it. I'm doing it, I said. And I smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in a long time. But not everyone was happy for me. I got a call from Patricia one afternoon. Her voice was serious. Margaret, she said, I have some news. John is out of money. He lost everything. The business, the house, the cars. He's living in a small apartment on the wrong side of town. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Are you going to be okay? Patricia asked. I'm fine, I said. I'm more than fine. I'm fine. That's good to hear. But there's something else. John has been trying to reach you. He's been calling your house. He's been sending emails. He wants to talk to you. I felt my stomach turn. I don't want to talk to him. I don't blame you. But he's been persistent. He says he has something important to tell you. He says he wants to make things right. I thought about John. I thought about everything he had done. I thought about the lies, the forgeries, the destruction. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the trampled garden. I thought about the letter he had forged in his father's hand. Patricia, I said. I can't see him. I can't talk to him. I can't do it. That's okay. You don't have to. Just promise me you'll think about it. I hung up the phone. I sat in the garden. I looked at the lavender, the rosemary, the wild roses. They were beautiful. They were strong. They had survived everything. And so had I. But I couldn't stop thinking about Patricia's words. John was desperate. John was broken. John was reaching out. And I couldn't help but wonder. What did he want? The next day I got a letter. It was in John's handwriting. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to throw it away. But I couldn't. I had to know. I opened the envelope. I unfolded the paper. The letter was short. Margaret, I wrote this letter because I don't know how else to reach you. I know you don't want to see me. I know you don't want to hear from me. But I need to tell you something. I need to tell you the truth. I have been seeing a therapist. I have been trying to understand why I did what I did. I don't have any excuses. I was greedy. I was cruel. I was broken. But I am trying to change. I am trying to be better. And I want to apologize. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserve to hear it. I am sorry for everything. I am sorry for the dinner. I am sorry for the lies. I am sorry for the forgery. I am sorry for trying to take your garden. I am sorry for trying to destroy you. I am sorry for being the worst person you have ever met. If you ever want to talk to me, I will be here. If you don't, I understand. But I wanted you to know that I am trying. I am trying to be the man my father wanted me to be. I am sorry. John. I read the letter 3 times. I felt tears streaming down my face. I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. But I knew one thing. He had written the words. He had reached out. He had tried. And that meant something. I put the letter on the table. I went out to the garden. I looked at the plants. I touched the lavender. I breathed in the rosemary. I don't know what to do. I whispered to my husband. He hurt me. He hurt us. He hurt everything we built together. But he's trying. He's actually trying. I didn't hear an answer. I never did. But I felt something. I felt a warmth in my chest, a quiet voice that told me I didn't have to forgive. But I didn't have to hold on to the anger either. I walked back into the house. I picked up the phone. I called Patricia. Tell John I'll see him, I said. Tell him to come to the garden. Next Saturday. At noon. Patricia was silent for a moment. Are you sure, Margaret? I'm sure. I hung up. I looked out the window at the garden. It was beautiful in the fading light. The plants were still growing. The flowers were still blooming. And I was still the vine. I woke up on Saturday with a knot in my stomach that I hadn't felt since the day of the hearing. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I watched the sun rise over the garden and I tried to calm the racing of my heart. I had spent the week preparing for this. Not preparing my garden. Not preparing my business. Preparing myself. I had read John's letter a dozen times. I had tried to find the lies in it, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. I hadn't found any. The letter was simple. The letter was raw. The letter was the first honest thing John had ever said to me. But I didn't trust him. I couldn't trust him. He had hurt me too many times. He had taken too much from me. He had forced me to fight for everything I had. And I had won. But winning had cost me. It had cost me my peace of mind. It had cost me my sense of safety. It had cost me the belief that people could change. And now I was about to find out if I was wrong. At 11 o'clock, I walked through the garden. I checked the lavender. I checked the rosemary. I checked the wild roses. They were all beautiful, all strong, all growing. I touched their leaves. I breathed in their scent. I drew strength from them, the way I always did. At 11:30, I heard a car pull up. I walked to the front of the house. I opened the gate. And there he was. John was standing on the sidewalk. He looked different. He was thinner. His clothes were worn, not expensive. His hair was grayer. His face was lined with worry. He looked like a man who had been through a war and lost. "Margaret," he said. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let him in. We walked to the garden. I sat down on the bench by the roses. John stood in front of me, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the ground. "I didn't think you would agree to see me," he said. "I didn't think you would ever want to see me again. I didn't think I would want to see you again either. But I read your letter." And I looked at him. I looked at his tired face, his defeated posture. I remembered the man who had walked into my house with 26 strangers. I remembered the man who had laughed at me in my own dining room. I remembered the man who had forged his own father's handwriting. And I realized, with a shock that went through me like a knife, that I didn't see that man anymore. I saw someone else. I saw someone who had lost everything. I saw someone who had hit rock bottom. I saw someone who was trying to find his way back. "I don't know if I can believe you," I said. "You lied to me. You hurt me. You tried to destroy me. How do I know this isn't another trick?" John looked up. His eyes were red. "You don't," he said. "You have no reason to believe me. I know that. But I'm going to tell you the truth anyway. I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm just going to tell you everything, and then you can decide what you want to do." I nodded. I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I started hating you the day my father introduced you to me," John said. "I was young. I was selfish. I didn't want anyone else in my father's life. I wanted him to be alone. I wanted him to need me. And when he married you, when he started talking about how happy you made him, I felt like I had been replaced." "That's not true," I said. "Your father loved you. He never stopped loving you. I know that now. I didn't know it then. I thought you had taken him away from me. I thought you had stolen his affection. And I started planning. I started thinking about how I was going to take everything back. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything. The house. The land. The money. Everything my father had worked for. I thought I deserved it. I thought I had a right to it. And I thought you were nothing. I thought you were just some woman who had married an old man for his money." And now John laughed. It was a bitter laugh, the kind that came from someone who had seen himself clearly for the first time. "And now I know I was wrong. I know you loved him. I know you took care of him. I know you were the best thing that ever happened to him. And I was just a bitter, jealous, horrible person." He sat down on the ground. He didn't care about the dirt. He just sat there cross-legged looking up at me. "After the hearing I lost everything," he said. "My business collapsed. My wife left me. My friends abandoned me. I lost everything. And I realized for the first time that I had done it all to myself. I had made choices. I had made terrible choices. And I had to live with them. Claire left you. She left me the day after the hearing. She said she couldn't be with someone who had lied like that. She said she couldn't trust me. And she was right. I had lied. I had lied to everyone. I had lied to the court. I had lied to myself." I looked at him. I thought about Claire, about her cruel smile, about the way she had laughed at me. I thought about how she had been the one who had spread rumors, who had tried to have me declared incompetent. And I thought about how she had left John the moment things got hard. She didn't love you, I said. She loved the idea of you. She loved the money, the status, the power. And when that was gone, she was gone too. John nodded. I know that now. I don't blame her. I don't blame anyone. I just blame myself. We were silent for a long moment. The garden was quiet. The birds were singing. The sun was warm on my face. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why did you ask to see me? Because I wanted to say something to your face. Not in a letter. Not in a phone call. In person. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the dinner. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for the forgery. I'm sorry for trying to take your home. I'm sorry for trying to destroy you. I'm sorry for being a terrible son to my father and a terrible stepson to you. I felt tears in my eyes. I didn't want to cry. I had spent so long being angry, so long being strong. But I couldn't help it. I felt the tears streaming down my face. John, I said. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But I appreciate you telling me this. I appreciate you being honest. He nodded. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know the truth. He stood up. He brushed the dirt off his pants. He walked toward the gate. Wait, I said. He turned around. What are you going to do now? I asked. You said you lost everything. You said your business collapsed. What are you going to do? He shrugged. I don't know. I'll figure something out. I'll get a job. I'll start over. It's not going to be easy, but I'm not going to give up. I looked at my garden. I looked at the plants I had nurtured, the flowers I had grown, the business I had built. I thought about everything I had been through. I thought about the vine, the way I had climbed, the way I had grown through everything. And I made a decision. John, I said. I need help. He blinked. What? I need help. I can't run this business by myself. I'm 74 years old. I need someone to help me plant, to help me harvest, to help me pack orders. I can't do it alone. John stared at me. You want me to help you after everything I did? I want you to earn a second chance, I said. I'm not offering you a job. I'm offering you the chance to prove that you've changed. The chance to show me that your letter was real. The chance to make things right. John was silent for a long moment. He looked at the garden. He looked at the house. He looked at me. Margaret, he said. I don't deserve this. I know, but I'm giving it to you anyway. He walked back to me. He knelt down in front of me. The way I knelt in the garden every day. I'll do it, he said. I'll help you. I'll work as hard as I can. I'll prove to you that I've changed. I'll prove to you that I'm not the same person I was. Then start tomorrow, I said. Be here at 7 in the morning. Bring gloves. It's going to be a long day. He nodded. He stood up. He walked out of the garden. I sat there, on the bench, looking at the roses. I felt a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. It was something else. It was hope. I had given John a chance. I had given him the same chance my husband had given me when I was lost and alone, and didn't know what to do with my life. I had given him the chance to grow. And I hoped, with all my heart, that he would take it. That night, I sat in the garden. I watched the sun set. I watched the stars come out. I thought about my husband. I thought about my father. I thought about the dice charm on my wrist. You roll the dice every day. You don't know what's going to come up, but you play anyway. You keep playing. I had rolled the dice. I had taken a chance. I had given John a second chance even though he didn't deserve it. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like I had made the right decision. John showed up at 7 the next morning. I was already in the garden pulling weeds when I heard the gate creak. He was wearing old jeans and a flannel shirt. He had work gloves in his hands. He looked nervous. Good morning, he said. Good morning. There's coffee in the kitchen if you want some. He shook his head. I'm fine. Just tell me what to do. I pointed to the rosemary bed. Those need to be trimmed. Not too much. Just the dead parts. Be careful with the roots. He nodded. He walked over to the rosemary. He knelt down. He started trimming. I watched him for a moment. He was careful. He was gentle. He was nothing like the man who had stood in my dining room with 26 strangers. I didn't know if this was real. I didn't know if this would last. But I decided, right then, to give him the chance to prove it. The first week was awkward. John didn't talk much. He just worked. He did everything I asked him to do, and he did it without complaining. He trimmed the rosemary. He watered the lavender. He harvested the wild roses. He packed orders. He cleaned the garage. He did everything. And I watched him. I watched his hands. I watched his face. I watched the way he moved through the garden. He was different. He was quieter. He was sadder. But he was also determined. He was trying. On the 7th day, I brought him a cup of tea. We sat on the bench by the roses. Why are you doing this? I asked. Why are you really here? John took a long sip of his tea. He stared at the garden for a long moment before answering. Because I have nowhere else to go, he said. And because I need to do something good. I've spent my whole life doing bad things. I've spent my whole life taking. And now I need to give something back. You could have gotten a job anywhere. You could have started over somewhere else. Why did you come here? He looked at me. His eyes were tired, but they were clear. Because this is where I did the most damage, he said. This is where I hurt you the most. And this is where I need to make it right. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. The weeks turned into months. John kept working. He kept showing up. He kept trying. And slowly something changed. He started talking more. He started asking questions about the garden, about the business, about my husband. He started telling me stories about his father, stories I had never heard before. He used to take me fishing, John said one afternoon. Every summer. We would drive to the lake and sit on the dock and fish for hours. He never caught anything. Neither did I. But he didn't care. He just wanted to spend time with me. Your father loved you, I said. He never stopped loving you. I know that now. I didn't know it then. I thought he was trying to buy my affection. I thought he was trying to make up for something. But he wasn't. He just wanted to spend time with me. And I was too blind to see it. You were young. You were angry. You were hurting. I was hurting. But that doesn't excuse what I did. No, I said. It doesn't. But it explains it. John looked at me. His eyes were wet. You're the only person who has ever given me a second chance, he said. My father gave me 12 chances. And I blew every single one of them. And then you gave me a chance. Even after everything I did. Why? I thought about it. I thought about my husband, about his final words. I thought about my father, about his dice charm. I thought about the garden, the way it had grown through everything. Because everyone deserves a second chance, I said. Everyone deserves the chance to grow. Even people who have done terrible things. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve any of this. Maybe not. But I'm giving it to you anyway. He laughed. It was a broken laugh, but it was real. You're the most stubborn person I have ever met, he said. You're worse than my father. And that's saying something. I'm the vine, I said. I don't give up. I just keep growing. And we both laughed. It was the first time we had laughed together. It felt good. By the end of the summer, my business was thriving. I had regular customers. I had an online store. I had a reputation. People came from miles away to buy my sachets, my oils, my flowers. I was making enough money to pay the taxes. I was making enough money to live comfortably. But the best part wasn't the money. It was the garden. It was the work. It was the quiet satisfaction of watching things grow. And it was John. He had become a partner. Not a friend. Not yet. But a partner. Someone I could rely on. Someone who showed up every day and did the work. Margaret, he said one morning. I want to tell you something. I looked up from the lavender. What? I've been seeing a therapist. Every week. I've been trying to understand why I did the things I did. And I've been trying to change. I want you to know that. I nodded. I know you have. I've seen it. I'm not the same person I was. I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. But I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be the man my father wanted me to be. You are that man, I said. You just didn't know it. He looked at me. He had tears in his eyes. Thank you, Margaret, he said. For everything. For giving me a second chance. For believing in me. For not giving up on me. I never gave up on you, I said. I was angry. I was hurt. But I never gave up on you. Because your father never gave up on you. And I loved your father. So I kept loving you too. We stood in the garden, the two of us surrounded by lavender and rosemary and wild roses. The sun was warm. The birds were singing. It was a perfect moment. Your father would be proud of you, I said. He would be so proud of you. John nodded. He couldn't speak. He just stood there, crying. And I stood there with him. That evening I sat on the porch with Sarah. The sun was setting over the garden. It was beautiful, Mom, Sarah said. I can't believe you forgave him. I can't believe you gave him a second chance. I didn't forgive him, I said. Not really. I'm still working on that. But I gave him a chance. As everyone deserves a chance. Even people who have done terrible things. You're a better person than me. I'm not a better person. I'm just a person who has been given a lot of chances. And I know how important they are. Sarah looked at me. She had tears in her eyes. I love you, Mom, she said. I love you so much. I love you too, baby. More than you'll ever know. We sat there, watching the sun go down. The garden was beautiful. The house was beautiful. Everything was beautiful. And I thought about everything I had been through. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the hearing. I thought about the destruction. I thought about the rebuilding. I thought about the growth. I thought about the vine. I had been through so much. I had lost so much. I had fought so hard. And now, finally, I was at peace. I walked down the steps. I walked through the garden. I touched the lavender. I touched the rosemary. I touched the wild roses. They had grown so much. They had survived so much. They were beautiful. And so was I. I walked back to the house. I looked at the clock on the mantel. It was still ticking. Tick, tock, tick, tock. My husband's clock. My husband's memory. My husband's love. I kept my promise, I whispered. I took care of the garden. I took care of your son. I took care of everything. The clock kept ticking. The garden kept growing. And I kept living. I was the vine. I had grown through everything. I had survived everything. I had turned everything into something beautiful. And I was still growing. The world outside my garden was full of noise. But inside these walls, inside these rows of lavender and rosemary and wild roses, I had found something that mattered. Something that would last. Something that no one could ever take away from me. I had found my peace. And I had found my family. Not the family I had been given. The family I had built. Sarah. John. The garden. The house. The clock on the mantel. All of it. It was mine. It was beautiful. It was everything. I walked back to the porch. I sat down beside Sarah. Can I tell you something? I said. Always. I'm happy, I said. I'm finally happy. And I didn't think I would ever be happy again. But I am. Sarah smiled. That's all I ever wanted for you, Mom. That's all I ever wanted. We sat there, mother and daughter, watching the stars come out. The garden was quiet. The house was quiet. Everything was quiet. And it was perfect. John came out of the house a few minutes later. He had 2 cups of tea. He handed one to me and one to Sarah. He sat down on the steps. We should do this more often, he said. I smiled. We should. I looked at the garden. I looked at the house. I looked at my daughter. I looked at my stepson. I looked at everything I had built. It wasn't perfect. It was never going to be perfect. But it was mine. And it was beautiful. I reached up and touched the bracelet on my wrist. The dice charm was warm against my skin. You roll the dice every day. You don't know what's going to come up. But you play anyway. You keep playing. I had played the game. I had rolled the dice. And I had won. But winning wasn't the point. The point was the garden. The point was the love. The point was the forgiveness. And in the end, that's all that mattered. I looked up at the stars. I thought about my husband. I thought about my father. I thought about everyone I had loved and lost. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for everything. The stars twinkled. The garden was quiet. And I was at peace. Speech balloon. Have you ever given someone a second chance? Even when they didn't deserve it? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Because every story matters and every chance can change a life. Backhand index pointing down. Fire. I was the vine. I had grown through everything. I had survived everything. And I was still growing. Fire. This is the moment I never expected. The man who tried to destroy me, kneeling in the garden that was meant to be my grave. What happened next changed everything. If you want to see the full journey, the forgiveness, the final bloom, hit that subscribe button now. Bellhop bell, thumbs up if this story touched your heart. Please smash that like button. Every like is a seed planted in my garden. Rose a love letter. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to grow. Never too late to forgive. Never too late to bloom. Bell subscribe and turn on notifications, because the vine is still climbing, and there are so many more stories to tell. Greenheart, see you in the next one. Thank you for walking through my garden with me.